What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about worship pads and how to make your own from scratch. Here we go. So here's my Logic session. The song is Christ Be Magnified. I was producing it for loopcommunity.com. It's a pretty straightforward worship song, a lot of big guitars, a lot of big pads, keys, drums. And so here, let's solo up this worship pad that I created, and let's take a look at how that kind of fades into the intro and kind of sets the tone for the song. So you can kind of hear how that pad is just kind of like really pretty, and it has a lot of like detail to it, and it really sets the song up for success since it's the first thing that people are going to hear. If we zoom into the pad here, you can see it's all audio. And so the reason I did that is because I played it as MIDI. But if it's one kind of note holding out through the whole song being a pad, if I want to start from like the middle of the song and I'm recording something else, then that MIDI isn't going to play. So if you print it as audio once you got your sound dialed in, that's a good way to kind of just like have it finalized. Now I don't delete the MIDI file, so I can show you that right now. Now here's the MIDI file. So the intro starts on a certain chord that I'm playing, and then it kind of just moves to a different chord. This is because I was trying to replicate the song as close as possible. I know the key of the song, it's B flat, and so I kind of started with B flat, sus2 with a 6 in there, and that kind of just adds a little bit of variety rather than just holding the 1 of the key. It kind of just adds a different flavor to the intro of the song, and I think that was really cool. And then once the verse kicks in around measure 13, that's when I go to sustaining the 1, 5, and the 1 again. And so I know that that's not going to clash with any other chord in the song because it's just the 1, the 5th, and the 1 again. So if we dive in, let's take all this processing off. First, we start with a Labs software instrument. Now, this is a free software plugin. I highly recommend you download it. It's Spitfire Audio Labs. And so it's a bunch of free pianos, synths, strings. There's a million libraries that you can get all for free. And so right here I have the synth pads library, pad number 4. I think it's a really fun sound. This is what it sounds like with none of this processing on there. So as you can hear, it's quite a bit different from the final product. It has like no sustain, and it's kind of just like bland. And so let's do some fun stuff to it because that's fun. From there, I wanted it not to just be like one note and sustaining. I added an arpeggiator to it, which is here in Logic. And so I actually started with the classic cycle number 1, and I sped it up to 16th notes so that it sounds like this. So that way, it's not just one note sustaining, it's actually playing notes all throughout the song, which I think is really cool because it's never the same thing. Then we move into a little bit of EQ. Now at first sight, it just looks like I'm doing a simple EQ move, but actually, if I direct you down to where it says processing, I am only processing the mids. I'm scooping the mids, which was where a lot of the presence of this pad lives. And so by doing that, eliminating a lot of the presence in the mids leaves a lot of it for the sides. And so this is called mid-side processing. And so now I can give you a before and after with this EQ in and out. You're gonna notice it a little bit wider if you're listening on stereo system or headphones. You'll notice a little bit of width when I turn it on. Here we go. Yeah, so it just kind of gets out of the way of where the vocal would be and where any other lead mono instrument is going to be, because this is supposed to be an ambient type of pad and it's going to stay wide if we do this. Moving on, we have the SSL Channel, probably my favorite plugin of all time. We're just cutting a bunch of the lows. We don't need them. We're cutting a bit of the mids too, around 700, just to get a little bit more of a scooped sound going on. Same with here, scooping more mids, and then taking more lows out just because this only goes up to 350. So I wanted to get a little bit higher and scoop all those out. And that's pretty much all I'm doing there with that. So that's just a little bit extra carving out, if you will. If we move on, this is where the magic happens. This is the Sound Toys effects rack. If you wait till Black Friday, you can get it on a huge sale, which is what I did. So this whole plugin just has a library of the greatest hits of Soundtoys plugins. On the right side here, you can just build your own rack for each instrument. And so here I started with the radiator. This is something I like to use on all of my software instruments. If you bump up that input gain, it adds a little bit of saturation and it makes the software instrument sound a little bit more analog and real. So I love starting with this in my rack. So here's really where the magic starts to happen. The crystallizer. I highly recommend if you're trying to make pads for yourself. It's really cool and it makes it sound a lot more unique than just a stagnant pad. It's really hard to explain what it does, but I'll just let you listen to it and so you can hear. Let me mute the rest of these things. So, as you can hear, it adds some octaves. It kind of acts as a almost arpeggiator, almost like a delay. It kind of just creates this beautiful soundscape that I just love so much about it. So that's what the crystallizer does. If we move on to the last bit of magic, we're gonna add the filter freak. This thing is really good because it's not only a low pass filter, but also if it passes a certain threshold, which is over here, it'll actually act as kind of an automatic envelope. And so if it hits that threshold, it'll kind of play with it and not actually keep it just as a low pass the whole time. Let's see what happens when we add that in. So for the most part, it is actually just working as a low pass. But it's kind of cool because in louder sections, if you open up the envelope and it starts hitting that threshold, you can get some pretty fun sounds with it. The last thing I'm doing in the effects rack is a little bit of delay, but really wet and wide delay with the Echo Boy Jr. Let's see what happens when you turn that on. So as you can hear, it just leaves a lot of the wet tail of the actual sound in so that it creates more of that pad rather than actual notes being played by the arpeggiator. So that's just all I'm doing in the effects rack. It's really fun to kind of get creative and just kind of try out different things every time. And that's what makes these pads unique, is that no every pad is just gonna have all of this processing on it. The last couple things I did with this pad is sent it to a couple buses. Let's open that up. So first we sent it over to an 1/8 ping pong delay. I love using the Baby Comeback delay plugin by Baby Audio. It was free, so that's fun. And it has a lot of really cool features. For example, the flavors. I love putting it on the cheap because it kind of does a little bit of a bandpass, as well as my EQ after the delay is doing a bandpass. Yeah, so I have it as a straight 1/8 ping pong. It has a little bit of a ducker if you want. I'm not really using that right now, but so making it really wet and really wide because it's a ping pong will do this. So again, we're just adding a little bit more wetness to the sound, as well as this bus number 6 over here. This is just another reverb. It's a free Valhalla reverb. It's really, really nice. I just cut a lot of the highs, bump up the feedback and the warp, and it sounds like this. And so that is all the processing that I'm doing on this pad. Once again, we started with it sounding like this. Pretty big improvement, if you ask me, again, to sounding like this. And so that is how I go about creating my own worship pads. Again, I also use these kind of strategies, creating my own synths, starting with kind of a stale sound and then reworking it and kind of adding effects via the Soundtoys effects rack. And so let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.